Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April 2026 edition of Little Nuggets of Tech and Telecom with Jen Fritchie and Carolyn Brandon. Yes, it's tax day, and there are a lot of things going on in the world, but Jen, I'm super excited to host our guest, Mr. Mike Dano, lead analyst at Ookla, lead industry analyst at Ookla. And I think you and I were just comparing notes. I think he is among the very few that is a repeat guest. I think he and Mark Gansey might be
Yes,
the only two that we've had back more than once. So, Mike, thank you very, very, very much for making the time to join us. And
Of
Jen, thank
course.
you for joining from Europe. Really appreciate it.
absolutely. I'm psyched to be here.
So we have a lot to cover. First, let me just, find out a little bit more about what you're up to, Mike. So the last time you were on, you were an analyst at Light Reading. Obviously, you have now transitioned to Ookla. Was curious, what is your portfolio at Ookla, and sort of what keeps you up at night?
Sure. No, and thanks so much for the opportunity. Thanks again for letting me be in the rarefied air of the Two Timers Club. So I appreciate the invitation today. And you're right. Yeah, last time we spoke, I was a journalist at Light Reading, covering the telecom industry, and so I'm still doing basically the same thing. So I about a year ago, I made the transition into hashtag analyst life. And so now I am an analyst here at Ookla. And if you're not familiar with Ookla, they are the company behind the speed test app. And they also have a couple of other business lines. They have a business called Ekahau, which is professional enterprise Wi-Fi installation. They operate the website Down Detector that tracks whether services are up or down across the globe. And then they also have Root Metrics, which is a controlled drive testing business. And so, as a Ookla analyst, I'm able to uh, go through all those different data sets and compare and contrast and basically swim in the Ookla data lake and see what is interesting in there. So that's what I've been doing for the past year.
Which is extremely interesting to a bunch of folks at Georgetown Center. But before we get into more about what Ookla is doing and how it's doing it in the face of AI tools, Jen, I know you've got top of mind burning question based on headlines this morning and leading up, pretty much the last week or two.
Yes, and I guess I'm all confused by my days because I'm sitting on the other side of the pond. But I'm very interested to pick your brain on a company I used to follow that's now being owned or will be owned by a hyperscaler, that being Global Star. And I'm curious the motives by Amazon's purchase here, Mike. Do you see this as purely a spectrum play or, a competitor to Starlink or both? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is the interesting news event of, I would say, the last at least couple weeks. Things seem to be happening so fast lately, but for sure that in my little area, that's, I think, a very interesting development. And I think my broad takeaway is that, yes, Amazon Leo is now a very direct competitor to Starlink. And essentially, my take is that what this deal does is that it gives Amazon Leo a direct to device business line, meaning that previously Amazon Leo, had been targeting fixed internet services, and now Amazon Leo has an opportunity to also sell mobile services from its
Mhm.
satellites, and really those are two. They're sort of related but different. So the fixed
Right.
services, as we know from Starlink, you buy a receiver, you set it out in your backyard, you get satellite internet to your home or office. Direct to device, D to D, Starlink also offers that, but it's much different. In fact, it uses different satellites. Starlink has a completely different satellite constellation for fixed internet services versus mobile internet services. And the mobile internet services are literally connecting to a user's existing cell phone. And then, so, when you go out into the mountains, you're able to send a text message, maybe get a little bit of data. And so that is what Amazon Leo has essentially bought itself into. And I think, the last thing I say is pretty noteworthy in that the amount. I saw somewhere, I have not checked this directly yet, but I saw somewhere that this is essentially Amazon's second biggest acquisition ever, aside from Whole Foods. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
right? So this is a pretty big one for them. So, but it gets them into this, smartphone connectivity game, smartphone and beyond.
So let me pick up on that. We've seen statements, and I think, they even have this on one of their websites, by Starlink suggesting that mobile network operators are essentially, I wouldn't say a thing of the past, but in their vision for the Starlink service and where that's all going to fit into our broadband marketplace, I think their quote was something like, the MNOs won't need to invest as much into their terrestrial mobile networks going forward if the vision that Starlink had comes to fruition. Walk us through that. How is it that somehow our terrestrial mobile networks won't necessarily be important anymore? It seems.
Correct. Well, from everything that I understand about how the service works, its capabilities now, and what they're planning in the future, it sure seems to me that this D2D service, whether it's from Starlink or Amazon Leo, it is complementary at this point. Meaning that if you're in a place like Denver, that's where I am right now. I'm in downtown Denver. D2D will play no role either now or in the sort of far-flung future about how my phone or my computer get connected. It just won't really play a role. The current terrestrial network, current cell towers, that's what I'm going to use. However, as I travel out to the edges of that network, I think that's where D2D starts playing. And certainly as I go, way out into the mountains where there are no cell towers. And I think what Starlink is talking about and what makes sense to me is the edges of that terrestrial cellular network are now areas of evaluation
Mhm.
where, if AT&T wanted to build a new cell tower in the Grand Canyon to cover new parts of Grand Canyon National Park, maybe it'll reconsider that investment. Maybe instead it will use a D2D provider instead of building that cell tower. Or, potentially in the cases of looking at the edges of that cell coverage, maybe on the very outskirts of Denver, as it heads up into the foothills, maybe there's a tower out there that is really not heavily used. And
Mhm.
in that case, maybe the economic calculation becomes, maybe not today, but maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, maybe the economic calculation becomes, well, probably we don't need that cell tower anymore. Instead, we will use a D2D solution from a company like Starlink or Amazon Leo instead of continuing to operate that cell tower on the edge of our network. But again, I think in downtown areas, and no one believes that these D2D signals are going to penetrate buildings. Um, and 80 to 90% of your sort of mobile time is spent inside of a building. So, in that regard, we're really talking about really an outdoor solution. So again, the limits are pretty clear in my mind so far. Still, as the industry evolves, that may change, but I think that's the scenario we're talking about for at least the next 3 to 4 years.
Which makes
Mike,
perfect sense that it's complementary. I mean, maybe that's not as sexy a headline as, wow, Starlink is going to supplant all MNOs, but to me, that makes much more engineering sense and it
And
recognizes the
but
reality of where we are with the technologies.
Exactly. If you look at it from a different perspective, I mean, for me, and thinking about my kids heading off to college, now
You're too
I don't
young for
have.
kids going to
I
college, Mike.
know.
Come on.
Tell me about it, dude. Tell me about it. I feel the same way. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, so my daughter is planning a road trip this summer, and so in a D2D world, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about her heading out to a campsite that is, completely disconnected and her getting a flat tire. I don't have to worry about my son going on a hike, breaking his ankle and not getting any help. It really, even though we spend, 98% of our time already inside of a city with good terrestrial coverage, it's that 2% of the time when concerns are raised. It's when you start to worry about, I don't do a lot of, you know, super dangerous rock climbing inside of the city of Denver, right? That's super unprotected and with loose rock and weather is coming in. That's not where that happens. It's out in the mountains where a D2D connection, the value of that D2D connection becomes much greater, much greater.
And at
and
vacations at the beach too, just,
Or
just
the
saying.
vacations at the beach. Sure. I mean,
Jen,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if I could push on that a little bit, I mean, there is a difference between Denver and the middle of nowhere. I mean, the middle of like, the smaller tier cities, you mentioned the outskirts of Denver. It feels like physics still has to matter here. And You also mentioned inside the building, which brings up like the bigger water cooler question in our circles, both in Wall Street and DC, is if you look at the TMT acronym, there's a belief that the second T, which I'd put telecom, may transform tremendously, and maybe would be owned by one of these, either a hyperscaler or Starlink. Starlink's going to have a new currency if they get their IPO, has been published this summer. How do you think of that? Like, will Verizon or AT&T eventually, because they do hold important spectrum that Elon and Jeff Bezos and Andy Jassy can't get in an auction. How do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, we are entering a new era of the industry where these giant technology companies are just coming further and further into the telecom industry. I think that is, indisputable. And I would say, I mean, we've been talking about the D2D side of this equation. If we want to talk about the fixed side of the equation, certainly Starlink is creating a pretty good amount of competition to existing copper and cable internet providers, fixed cable internet providers with the fixed Starlink service. So yeah, I mean, it is a remarkable situation where these hyperscalers are just increasingly encroaching. However, here's what I'll caveat that with, though, is that the deals that we've seen so far, and especially like you mentioned the spectrum, I think it's pretty clear at this point that companies like Amazon and Starlink are really interested in a scalable global spectrum strategy because their acquisitions have been the companies with this MSS spectrum, like EchoStar. Starlink has this deal with EchoStar for the spectrum. That's for their MSS spectrum, which is it stretches far beyond the borders of the U.S. And same with Globalstar. Globalstar's MSS spectrum rights stretch far beyond the borders of the U.S. And so I think it would be. I'm struggling to imagine a scenario where a global company like Amazon with global ambitions would want to spend a lot of money on spectrum that is only available in the US or Mexico. I think they're really operating on a global scale. And so their transactions for spectrum are going to reflect that desire of wanting to play on a global stage. And so I actually just looked at, the other companies that have this kind of spectrum, such as Viasat, I just looked at their spread. It's like 500% gain over the past 12 months. And I think, that's what that is, that other companies like Viasat hold this same kind of MSS spectrum that's really ideal for this kind of scenario. And I think that's why you're seeing that. It's that the amount of this kind of spectrum is, there's not a lot of it out there.
Got it.
Let me ask you a quick question. I think this was a report. I don't know if you per se were working on it, Mike, but Ookla had put out a report maybe a week or so ago, or a couple of weeks ago, I can't exactly remember, where it was essentially making the observation, watching Starlink's push into urban areas. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because I think, inside the Beltway and outside as well, I think the assumption is they're really focusing on providing that service in rural areas. And I thought it was really interesting that, in fact, they're also making ground in urban areas. So if you could talk to us about that, I thought that was really interesting.
Yes, I think that is a very underappreciated situation that's actually playing out right now. So yeah, we talked about, so Starlink Internet Services has a couple of different lines of business. One of them is in-flight Wi-Fi. One of them is, direct to device. That's a different line of business. One of them is the fixed internet services that they sort of started out with, and that's where you buy the receiver and you put it in your backyard. So I think it is underappreciated the extent to which that fixed internet service is competing directly with other fixed internet providers, such as cable providers and DSL providers. And so my colleague, Sue Merrick here at Ookla, just about 2 weeks ago, put out her big state broadband report. And in that report, you can see the percentage of Starlink users who live in rural areas versus those who live in urban areas. And the percentage of Starlink users who live in urban areas is significant and growing, and varies by state. Some states have a lot of those users, and some sites have fewer. But certainly, I think when Starlink first came on the scene, we all looked at that and thought, oh, that's satellite internet. Satellite internet is for locations that don't have any other options. And I think that was true for a while. I think that calculation, though, is changing. In fact, my brother-in-law lives in Socorro, New Mexico. He does not yet have a line of fiber to his house, but he does have copper. He's a Starlink customer, and he's a huge gamer. He plays like hardcore online video games all the time, and he is a huge fan of Starlink. He said it works just fine for all of his, and he's got 2 little girls. He's got a wife. Like he has a whole household of internet users, and they are all on Starlink without any complaints. And as you can see, the monthly fees for Starlink have been falling dramatically as Starlink has been launching additional satellites to support network capacity. Prices in places like the US and Europe are falling pretty dramatically, to the point where the monthly price for Starlink internet service is now pretty comparable to what you can get from cable, copper, fixed wireless. I wouldn't describe it as directly comparable to fiber, but the price is really pretty good in a lot of places at this point.
So I think maybe you, others, certainly a lot of others have made the point that it looks like fixed wireless, FWA, and fiber are coming for cable. But I think what's missing in that is fixed wireless, fiber, and satellite, right?
And satellite. I agree.
So,
I 100% agree with that.
So what is that looking like in reality? Or is it just that the cable subs are running? Because we keep hearing, wow, they're really increasing the stickiness of the subscribers who are on their wireless plans, and they're using that, obviously to grow adoption of other services. So what exactly is happening out there in the marketplace in terms of cable versus customers that are subscribing to these other services?
So many dynamics going on, and it's really hard to summarize it in just one, these people ought to watch out. It's really everybody is clashing against everybody else. We've got satellite offers that are increasingly competitive, and increasing the performance of the satellite network is increasingly competitive, as well as the price. Fixed wireless, same thing, as continues to expand. Performance is really good, price is really good. There's a fiber land grab. Everybody's building out, everybody's acquiring everybody else. There's a huge land grab. Even the big, we've seen the deals with Verizon acquiring Frontier and AT&T acquiring the Lumen mass markets business. There's a huge land rush on fiber. You're seeing all the sort of tier 2 and tier 3 fiber operators.
Sorry, Mike, can you just repeat what you just said? For some reason you froze. I apologize.
I froze. Sorry about that. No, I was just saying there's a huge land rush on fiber right now. That Verizon acquired Frontier, AT&T acquired Lumen Mass Markets, and among the tier 2 and tier 3 fiber operators, there's a big roll up going on. Everybody's acquiring everybody else. It's just a big land grab for fiber. The cable companies are responding with their MVNO services, and increasingly bundling different services, whether it's TV or mobile. Their latest offer is a router that has a 5G backup, so it never goes offline. If the cable network goes down, you've got this 5G backup, your services continue. So it really is just a clash of all these massive companies and extremely different technologies coming in to places like Socorro, New Mexico, which actually has a fiber builder, is literally right now building out fiber in Socorro, New Mexico. I mentioned that because it's like a city of 10,000. Like, who cares about Socorro, New Mexico? It's tiny. I grew up there. There's just nothing there. There's a Walmart and nothing else. My mom's
your brother,
but my brother-in-law too. That's true. But there's just, it's the kind of place where you drive outside of town to shoot a gun. Like, no one cares. It's just, it's a fun place to live. But anyway, it's like there's a fiber provider that's building out fiber networks in Socorro, New Mexico right now. There's a data center going in to Socorro, New Mexico. Starlink is available in Socorro, New Mexico. Like, they've upgraded the 5G networks in Socorro, New Mexico. Like, there's just so many options. You don't even necessarily have to go on to a fixed wireless or satellite or cable connection, because if you're content with just doing TikTok and Netflix on your phone, like, you can buy unlimited hotspot and that'll run your PC. So yeah, the number of options and the places that all those options are available is really pretty impressive. I was just speaking with the CTO of IQ Fiber, which was one of these sort of tier 2, tier 3 fiber operators. And he, even he's just talking about whether or not he wants to be the overbuilder, the fiber overbuilder, meaning there's already a fiber provider in some of the
Wow.
markets where he's operating, and he is still considering building an extra layer of fiber into these locations because the economics still work. So the amount of competition for a lot of these households across the U.S. is pretty impressive, and we're seeing some of the same things play out on a global basis in developed markets.
Is that sort of thing? I mean, it's not a measurement of networks, but is that narrative you just, not really narrative, that description of what's actually happening out there, is that something Ookla would, quantify and talk about, or really you guys are focused more on the measurement and what's the performance and that sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. No, we try to look at it holistically with both our data sets as well as data sets from others. So yeah, we're trying to get I mean, even like I talked about Sue's broadband report that came out a few weeks ago. It's the same thing. We're trying to understand, what the BEAD program is going to, how that will impact this build out, what percentage of Americans living in rural areas have internet services, what their internet experience is like, how it's been, significantly improving over the past couple of years. I mean, the percentage of Americans in rural areas with broadband that now meets the definition, the FCC's definition of broadband, meaning 100 megabytes down and 20 megabytes up, that percentage is increasing pretty significantly in states all over the country. So we're really seeing, the digital divide is, I mean, it's practically shrinking in real time as we watch the data come back from the measurements that we're taking.
That's
If
exactly
I
what I
could
was
ask,
going to ask. Go ahead, Jen.
yeah, if I could ask a question, like we've talked going back to the wireless side. I mean, like AT&T has a big wired department, but also probably 80% of their cash flow is coming from wireless. And it feels like D to D isn't going to replace. I mean, I'm assuming you agree with this. D to D, while interesting, it's not going to replace the spectrum that AT&T can carry on its networks. I recently read that like less than 5% of wireless traffic right now is AI enabled, and we're all getting AI phones. How do you see traffic growth and it kind of impacting the taxing on their wireless networks?
The wireless networks, yes. So I will tell you that among the Ookla analyst team, this is the question that we have been struggling with probably the most. And all of us have been doing a lot of work to figure out this AI thing. I know we all are. And I think what's interesting is that we're all using AI tools to figure this problem out. Like I've been
Right.
talking a lot with Gemini about, well, what is the traffic profile? So yes. And right now it does, from everything I've heard so far, there has not been a lot of direct impact onto cellular networks from AI traffic yet. Um, I think that's not to say there's no impact. It's just that so
Right.
far it's pretty minor. And I think I mean, I think we're all familiar with that. Like I pretty much talk to AI a lot. And sometimes I do pictures and sometimes I have it make pictures. Occasionally I'll have it make a video of RoboCop and a unicorn running around because I think it's hilarious. Like I just can't believe that we have a technology now that will do that kind of thing. But I think that's pretty rare, right? And we also saw, OpenAI shut down its Sora app, the video generation app that it had. And I think that's reflective of the fact that, yeah, we're just, in terms of AI generating a lot of video and that creating a lot of traffic on wireless networks, it's not happening yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. It's not happening yet. Then the question becomes, are these networks ready for an eventual load of traffic? And that is the question that we are spending a lot of time on. To understand, well, if traffic profiles are going to change over the next year or two, what might drive that? Certainly, the glasses from Meta and Ray-Ban are the
Yes.
ones that I think a lot of us have been really looking carefully at to see, because that is a device. Are we at an iPhone moment with a device like that or that device?
Mhm.
It doesn't
Does
seem like
those
it.
run on wireless networks? I don't yet have a pair, so
Yeah, I don't think they've got cellular, but I think it
okay.
backhauls to cellular, and
Okay.
there definitely seems to be an opportunity here for a pair of glasses that would connect to cellular and be augmented in real time. So you would literally, I would see your name above your head, as we go
Mhm.
out to get drinks after the show or whatever, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
I see your latest social media posts or whatever it is that, this real time augmented. I drive around and my glasses help me see which turn to take and that kind of stuff. I mean, that feels closer now than any other point, right, in recent history. That kind of, incredible, amazing, futuristic space age technology feels so tangibly close. And I think, were the right device to come along, just like the iPhone, we could have another iPhone moment that just, it makes traffic explode on the cellular networks. And so then the question becomes, can they handle that kind of upload traffic, upload and download in real time and low latency? And so that is an open question. So we've been looking at that. It's a sort of like, yes, maybe. It's like it
Okay.
depends on where you are. It depends on what the network characteristics are in your particular neighborhood, what traffic routing scenarios your operator has deployed in that particular location, and what the upload capabilities are. And then a lot of other stuff like battery life, which
Sure.
yeah,
But in
it's
your
just.
I guess my last question would be, in your conversation with the carriers, are they saying everything's great, we're good? Or are they looking down the horizon and seeing a cliff that might scare them?
I think there's a lot of hand wringing going on right now in
Mm.
terms of what can we expect, because no one wants to be caught flat-footed, right?
No.
They do not want to be overtaken by sudden data demands from their customers that they were unprepared for. And so I think there's a lot of hand wringing right now as to what exactly do we need to do right now in order to prepare for that future. Let's get some things in place. So I don't think there's necessarily a sense of panic. I think there's definitely a sense of like, let's stay on our toes. Let's evaluate our options. What kinds of techniques can we employ right now, and in the near term, to address that kind of traffic should it become a lot more serious than it is now. And I've seen some hints that, hey, the amount of upload traffic that we have on our network is starting to increase,
Yep.
from
Mm.
historical levels. So I think that, that's one indication that, hey, like, stuff is changing. The traffic flows are changing. It's the same as when like TikTok hit the scene. TikTok was, no one cared about TikTok, and then suddenly everyone started using it. Suddenly it was a traffic generator, and so they're really kind of keeping an eye on network trends right now to see if that kind of a moment is coming, or when when the YouTube video Gangnam Style, when all of us suddenly was like, have you seen this video Gangnam Style? That really drove a lot of operators to invest in that caching infrastructure inside their networks so that they could deliver Gangnam Style more quickly to users who clicked on it. They needed local, CDN, content delivery networks, local caching in order to deliver that kind of a service. And that, they had to sort of suddenly invest in that when everybody started watching Gangnam Style. So I think we're in the same situation as like, is Sora or ChatGPT or Gemini, are they suddenly going to offer something that everybody's going to want right now,
Yeah.
and can we respond with that?
And I think, Jen, that's where, you and I have this conversation a lot, which is, wow, after the big, beautiful bill, for example, is that whenever that spectrum that the federal government has to identify and make available for auction, will that, whatever it is, satisfy the need for more spectrum going forward? And I always come back with, there's never going to be enough. Any opportunity for robust, full power, exclusive, licensed spectrum, I think will be of interest to these companies as long as they're in the business of being MNOs.
Mhm.
But to your point, I almost wonder, not all of these MNOs are created equal, right? You see some, maybe one company going in one path to make sure it has robust capacity, another one taking a slightly different path. So to me, it's fascinating to see how these guys are all preparing for the inevitability of that moment, Jen, when, I don't know, Mike, if you have kids going to college, you might have been around when the iPhone was debuted. And I think there are still executives in various companies that were around when that happened. And I think, those were lessons learned, and nobody wants to see a repeat of the networks going down because the product was so awesome. Quick question for your team. I'm curious if there was any information to be gleaned about network impact around the Masters, given all of the news articles on the number of people going in with their little meta glasses and the folks in Augusta not realizing that these were the way to circumvent the ban on bringing your cell phones in, et cetera. So apparently it's quite the issue. They're kind of like, oops.
As soon as we're done, I'm going to go look at the data to see if I can find anything about that. That is very interesting. I had not heard that. That's great stuff.
Well, listen, I think we are actually 1 minute over. I just want to say thank you very, very much, Mike. I have learned so much. I'm sure you guys noticed I was taking notes throughout our chat here. And as I always do, just learn a lot of really good data-driven points talking with you. Jen, I'm pretty sure you feel the same exact way.
I would agree. And I'd recommend Mike as one of the best LinkedIn follows I have. So I'm trying to get Carolyn more active on LinkedIn, but with her brand. But yeah, it's a good read for anyone listening in. Great material and great content. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you again. I
Mike.
appreciate that.
Really appreciate
Thanks.
it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks so much.